delighted if you were able to help me. The reply that came from Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra, they said, rather it would be our honor. It would be our honor to see another human being eating, even if it means we remain hungry. That first day went past. Now you would think, okay, there may be more food at home. There's no more food. So let's fast the whole of the second day. You fast the whole of the second day, and as you're about to come, again, 5 loaves of bread are in front of you. You want to break that fast. As you're coming to break that fast, the door knocks again. Again, Amir al-Mu'mineen goes to answer. Fadda says, I thought, who would be knocking again at this door? A person at the door says, oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, I am a yatim. I am a person who is an orphan. And I'd be delighted if you would allow me to have some food. Imam turns around. He could see Hassan is hungry. Hussein is hungry. He could see Fadda has not eaten anything. He could see at the same time Fatima has not eaten anything. He says, but it doesn't matter. Let them have. Let them have in the way of Allah. The third time, who came? A person who was a captive, someone who was a prisoner originally. As they're about to break their fast, now it's taking their toll. Do you know, for a human being to go a couple of days without food, do you know how much love of Allah you must have inside you? Honestly. Honestly, there are some of us, if our mother is 5 minutes late with the food, if our wife is half an hour late with the food, you find us become grumpy for the whole day. It's as if, I don't know, are we reading the same Quran or no? Are we all reading the same Quran? Because here you have a family who can go 2 days out of their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, staying away. On the third day, he gives the food away. At this moment, when the verse was revealed and the Prophet found out about what they had done in these 3 days, the verse, what does it say? وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. Now, some of the scholars of tafsir mention something very interesting. They say, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ. They say they give away food out of their love for Allah or their love for the food. Some of the ulama say their love for the food. Why? Because they say naturally as a human being, when you fasted, you have that love for food, isn't it? It's natural in the human being that when you're fasting, you have that love to eat the food. How many of you in the holy month of Ramadan, when it gets near iftar time, you're dying to touch that food? As in you're looking at it and you're smelling it and you're moving, and then someone suddenly tells you, go and pray salah first. No salah, let me eat my food first. The human being can be that low sometimes. You find here what? They had that love for the food, but what? But إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We serve you and we feed you for what? To save the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't want any reward from you, nor do we want any thankfulness. Fizza was participating in that fast. In other words, when the verse was revealed, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا, it was Fidda who was amongst those who this verse was revealed about. And that's why, what do we find? We find that when Fatima al-Zahra died, Fidda was there. She was of those who narrated the events, which I will come to very shortly. But Fidda herself narrates that, do you know what Fatima gave me in my life? Fatima gave me the ability that for the last 20 years of my life, I only reply to people using the Quran. Someone says, what do you mean only reply to people using the Quran? Fatima al-Zahra acted as such a teacher to Sayyida Fidda that all the scholars of history say, if you study the last 20 years of conversations of Fidda, from the age of 66 until Karbala, she never answers except using the Quran. Is it miraculous? Do you remember there was a young boy a few years ago? Tabai, Iranian. He would only reply with the Quran, wouldn't he? Now you tell me, he has learned this through the great work of his mother. What if Fatima is your teacher? And that's why Abdullah Mubarak narrates, I saw this in my own eyes when I was on my way to Hajj. He says, I was on my way to Hajj. And while I was walking, I saw this lady. I thought, who is this lady? He said, the conversation that took place is of a lady who only answered my questions in the Quran and never had to resort to anything else. Listen to the conversation. Abdullah Mubarak sees her. He says to her, excuse me, who are you? She replied, the first verse, Surah 43, verse 89. قُلْ سَلَامٌ فَسَوْفَ يَعْلَمُونَ. Say salam first at the beginning of a conversation. He said, okay, sorry. He looked at her and he said, at that moment, he looked at her and he said to her, you know, Salamu alaikum, and I'm sorry, but are you in need of guidance? She replied to him, Surah 39, verse 37. وَمَن يَهْدِ اللَّهِ فَمَا لَهُ مِن مُضِلٍ. Whoever Allah guides can never be misguided. So he looked at her and he said, excuse me, are you a jinn or a human? She said to him, Surah 7, verse 31. Ya bani Adam, khudhu zinatakum inda kulli masjid. I'm Bani Adam. So he looked at her again and he said, okay, where have you come from? She replied, Surah 41, verse 44. أُولَٰئِكَ يُنَادُونَ مِن مَكَانٍ بَعِيدٍ. I have come from a faraway place. Okay, where are you going? Surah 3, verse 97. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. I am going towards Hajj. He said to her, how many days have you been lost from your caravan? She said, Surah 50, verse 38. خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ. 6 days. So he looked at her and he said, you must be hungry. Surah 21, verse 8. وَمَا جَعَلْنَاهُمْ جَسَدًا لَا يَأْكُلُونَ الطَّعَامِ. We did not create them as humans who don't eat food. So he looked at her and he said, okay, very well. Then he saw a camel moving and he thought that she could jump on this camel. So he said to her, quickly, go and run for this camel. She said, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not burden a soul except which it can handle. I can't run that fast. That was Surah 2, verse 282. Then he looked at her straight away. He said, okay, very well. Why don't you sit with me on the camel? I'll get a camel you can ride and sit with me on the camel. She replied with the famous verse, Surah 21, verse 22. لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. If there were gods besides Allah, there would be fasad. I'm not mahram to you. I can't sit with you on a camel. So he looked at her and he said, okay, very well. You ride the camel yourself, I'll walk. She replied to him again, Surah 43, verse 13. سبحان الذي سخر لنا هذا وما كنا له مقرنين. Then as they're riding, he's riding the camel, she's walking. All of a sudden, he sees 4 people in front of him. So when he sees the 4, he says, do you know them? She says, Ya Musa, inni ana rabbuk. The first one's called Musa. Second one, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard. Third one, Ya Yahya, khudh al-kitab biquwwa. Fourth one, wama Muhammad illa Rasul. He's wondering, okay, she knows them. So he asked her, how are they related to you? She replies, Surah 18, verse 46. Al-mal wal-banoon. Zinat al-hayat al-dunya. Wealth and your children are an adornment. They're my 4 sons. So then he's looking amazed. And then she looked at her sons. Her son said to her, Mom, should we reward this man? Has he looked after you? Surah 28, verse 26. Ya abati ista'jir, inna khayra man ista'jarta al-qawiy al-amin. Oh, my father, give him his wages, for the one you give the wages to has been trustworthy and honored with me. He looked at her and he said, thank you for the wages. She replied with Surah 2, verse 261, Wallahi yarzuqu man yasha. Have you ever in your life seen anyone from the school of Fatima graduate like this? Ask the daughters of Al Muhammad in our mosques today, do they even read Quran outside of Shahr Ramadan or no? Ask your daughter, does she read Quran? Do you know there is embarrassing situations in our communities today where there are mothers who can't even read Quran yet? The embarrassment is that they can't stand up to go to lessons because the pride they have doesn't allow them to go and say, I don't know. Look at this fidda, a servant of Fatima. Yet when she speaks, every line that she speaks is the Quran. And that's why at Karbala, she was a backbone to Sayyidah Zainab. At Karbala, how was she a backbone to Sayyidah Zainab? She was a backbone to Sayyidah Zainab first. When Habib ibn Madahir came to Karbala, it was Sayyidah Zainab who used fidda and said, Fidda, send my salams to Habib ibn Madahir. I know how close he is to my brother Abu Abdullah. Habib al-Madahir in Karbala, as you know, has his own grave. Imam al-Hussein, the companions, the family, and Habib by himself. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, when he buried Habib, he said, my father told me, let Habib have his own grave. That's the honor Habib has. Sayyida Zainab on the 10th of Muharram, when Fidda was with them, Fidda on that day, 85 years old, Fidda was. 85. In other words, this lady had served Al Muhammad from the beginning of Rasulullah's message until Karbala. 85 years of age. She went to Habib al-Madahir. She said, oh Habib, Sayyida Zainab sends her salams to you. That was number one. Number two, when Imam brought Qasim back to the tent. That was difficult. When Imam brought Qasim back to the tent. Do you know who he asked to calm the woman down? Fidda. Because Fidda had seen Hussein grow. So to him, Fidda was like his mother. When he brought Qasim back, he's trying to hold his body, but Qasim had been cut. So as he's trying to hold his body, he knows if his mother, Ramla, sees his body, that's going to be the end of her. So as he's approaching the tent, the hadith says he called out, oh my mother, Fidda, come to me. When Fidda came, she said, oh Hussein, what is it? Tell me, what should I do? He said, you see Qasim's body? She then wants to cry, but she controls herself. He says, now I want you to help Zainab, and I want you to help all of the ladies in this difficult moment. That was number two. Then number three, in Sham, Yazid orders one of his guards, the African guards, to whip who? To whip Sayyida Zainab. Imagine how difficult it is for Sayyida Zainab. He sees one of his guards, he says, go and whip Sayyida Zainab. At this moment, one of the guards, oh please, keep the light on, keep the light on. At this moment, one of the guards, what does he do? One of the guards, at this moment, what does he do? He is about to whip Sayyida Zainab and attack her. Sayyida Fidda stands up and begins to speak to him, because these people don't know Quran, begins to speak to him in their African language. Suddenly a conversation takes place in the court of Yazid in Sham between Fidda and between the African guards. And she's telling them in African, she's telling them, how dare you come forward to whip the granddaughter of Rasulullah? How dare you if you are men? How dare you even dare to come and whip a female? As in, subhanAllah, today when I hear people saying, Yazid, may Allah be pleased with him, Yazid was a Khalifa. Tell me, where is your scales? If Yazid is a Khalifa and he's about to order the whipping of the granddaughter of Rasulullah, who's your loyalty with, Rasulullah or Yazid? He orders this, she speaks to them, all of a sudden they move their swords towards Yazid. He tells them, how dare you are slaves? And they would reply to him, but we're all African slaves, all of us. All your African slaves are here. We don't mind killing you now. Either you let this lady free and show respect towards her, or there's going to be a mutiny from us. Imagine, what did Fidda say to them at that time? To make these African guards change. But also, how much did Fidda be willing to offer her body in place of Zainab? Isn't it? An 85-year-old. How many of you have seen mothers or grandmothers reach 85? Do they have the strength to stand through Kufa? The strength to walk through Sham? But she remained with Sayyida Zainab, and that's why the narrations say Sayyida Zainab died a year after Karbala, Fidda died a year after Karbala as well, in 62 after Hijrah. And when she died where Sayyida Zainab was. She remained loyal to Sayyida Zainab as well. The question is why? It's because Zainab's mother Fatima, before she died, asked Fidda to stay and look after Zainab all her life. It was a wasiyah of Fatima that Fidda protect Zainab wherever Zainab is. Because Zainab, when I am dying, how old is Zainab? When Fatima died, Zainab was 5 years of age. She said to her, this Zainab is 5. Kulthum is 1. Kulthum was 1.5 years of age. And Sayyida Zainab was 5. She said to her, oh Fidda, I beg of you. You've seen everything I've gone through. And I know it's going to be hard for my husband after I die, for these are 4 children without anyone to protect them. I want you to remain loyal to my husband and to my children wherever they may be. And truly she remained loyal to them at every step of the journey. And indeed it's from Fidda that we hear what's happened.